Hey everybody, this is Mike Belcito, co-founder of Product Collective, and we're back for another industry interview. I thank you for joining us today. I know, at least in Cleveland, Ohio here, it's like sunny and 87. So I feel like we're in this is like vacation land in Cleveland. I don't know if people are taking many vacations to Cleveland right now, but it kind of feels like that today. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. If this is your first time joining an industry interview, I'm going to lay out what these are all about. So don't worry about knowing what to do here. But I do want to mention that these are just one of the things that we do here at Product Collective. Product Collective is a community for product people. We started this a few years back, really just as product people ourselves that found ourselves confused and not really knowing, if we're doing this all right. So we tried surrounding ourselves with other product people in the form of this community. So that's been a lot of fun. We've been doing this for the last few years. And aside from these industry interviews, we have a number of things. We have a newsletter that goes out once a week. And that goes out to about 35,000 people. We have a pretty active Slack community. So if you aren't a part of that, you could just sign up at productcollective.com and you'll get an invite for that. We also run industry virtual workshops. And that's partnering with some of the top facilitators really in the world and in the entire world product-wise. And then we also organize our conference, Industry the Product Conference, and that's every fall in the US and every spring in Europe. And although I'll say this fall, really you could come, no matter where you're at, because it's going to happen in your home. We're going virtual, of course, not gathering in person, even though we normally have about 1,200 people with us in Cleveland. This year we will be virtual, but we still have 20 of the top product leaders that will be with us with keynotes, interactive Q&As. We also there's one-on-one video networking. We even have Ben Folds playing a virtual performance just for our industry attendees. So it should be a lot of fun. So I hope y'all can join us. And yeah, I'll email you all with more information about that. But back to these industry interviews, we do these twice a month, and this is with product leaders from really all over the world. And I mean that very seriously, as you'll find out in a little bit. But with these industry interviews, a couple things. You'll notice at the bottom, there is a chat function. There's also Q&A. Q&A is for you to load up for questions for our guests really at any time. If you have something that's on your mind, even right now, feel free to put it in there already. I'm going to be looking at that Q&A section, and I'm going to be taking as many of your questions as I can. We go to 1:30 Eastern, so these are half an hour. So there's definitely plenty of time for your questions. The chat, though, that's for you to introduce yourself, maybe say where you're from. In fact, if you don't mind, go ahead and in the chat, it's always fun seeing where folks are from. So again, I'm in Cleveland. You'll find out where my guest is today in just a little bit. But if you can mention that in the chat, that will be good. I see some people from London in the UK, from Sacramento, Philadelphia, Dublin. So that's awesome. That's awesome. It is cool seeing where everybody is coming in from. Before I get to introduce our guest, I want to give a big thanks to Revenera. Revenera is actually the sponsor for this particular industry interview. And it's a company that we've been working with actually for the last, I'd say a good year. And they're a really good company to work with. I know they have product people on their mind constantly. And really what they do is they help software and technology companies use open source solutions more effectively. And their big focus is to try to help companies find and mitigate security and license compliance issues early on in the process. So I'm going to, when I follow up, I'm going to send you a little bit more info about Revenera, but a big thanks to Revenera for helping with this industry interview too. They're also sponsored the upcoming industry virtual conference as well. So I appreciate their support for that. But getting right into the topic and our guest today, our guest is somebody that actually spoke at Industry last year in Cleveland. It was fun to have him out, but he's also the author of a new product book. Well, I should say just business book, but especially for product people, right? It's called The Influential Product Manager. And Ken Sandy, just thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Hi, Mike. So great to be here. Thanks for everything.
Yeah. Well, no, thank you for joining us. And I was sharing where folks are from earlier from all around the world, and I was surprised to learn where you are today.
That's right. I'm actually in Australia. So coming from Melbourne, Australia, all this way, I guess I'm a little, I traveled out from San Francisco a couple of months ago, actually for a wedding that didn't go ahead, unfortunately, but that's okay. We'll reschedule. It's a good friend of mine, and we'll reschedule it. But I've ended up staying here with some family I have locally. So it's been a really interesting experience for me because I've been basically trying to promote my book and do talks and of course, like everyone else, work remotely, but also with some time zone challenges. So,
Yeah.
but I'm really thrilled to be here, and it's been great.
Well, I so appreciate it, especially since it's the middle of the night. So, but yeah, I mean,
Oh,
hey,
great.
we're all connected at least. So it makes it a lot easier to have conversations. So that part is good, I suppose. Um,
Absolutely.
I wanted to maybe start the conversation off, with your book. I mean, I'm just curious, your experience is really interesting in my opinion. I mean, you are a practitioner in that you were a product leader for places like lynda.com and Masterclass, and elsewhere, but you also are an educator. I know that, you teach product management classes as well and have, for a bit of time. I know that actually putting resources into a book, I mean, it's one thing to write blog posts, but to put together a book, hundreds of pages, this topic you're focusing on, I'm just curious, maybe could you just talk a little bit about it and why you felt like it was so important to bring this book to life now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for that. Yeah, I'm definitely a practitioner at heart. My journey through product management has been one of the most rewarding and growing and humbling of my life. I also come from a long line of educators, parents, teachers, grandparents for teachers. I love to learn. And in turn, I love to coach and to encourage environments for creativity, personal development, a team of talented, sort of complementary skilled individuals to solve the world's problems. Um, I, um, I wrote the book because I'd heard a lot about product managers working or managing through influence and not authority to achieve their outcomes. And while I believe that statement is true, I'd also observed a lot of confusion and uncertainty from product managers about what that actually might mean in terms of what do I do day to day, what behaviors, activities in the workplace, how can I be more influential? And I didn't see a lot in the way of literature breaking that down from a high level concept into an actionable, practical set of steps that product managers could take at all stages of the product lifecycle, and across an increasingly complex set of stakeholders and environments. This topic has just become more and more important. And so why a book? Put all that efforts into the book. Well, I saw it as a great way to really scale my message beyond the classroom, beyond my own teams, beyond blog posts, to kind of a worldwide audience of aspiring and career product managers, and really inspire them to be better product managers. And as a resource for product leaders for their teams. And so I thought that was the best way to do that. Of course, it was a journey of a couple of years of my life, putting it in while I was also both teaching and of course leading actual teams. And that turned out to be very important because I had to put into practice what I was preaching as I went. And so what I discovered was, over a period of time, I ended up finding that I'd written something that very, very hands-on, practical, and applicable to the environments that we face today. So that's why a book. And so the bottom line is, I've made every mistake under the sun as I grew as a product manager, and it would be amazing if I could help others not make the same mistakes. And so hopefully the book will help.
I love that. I loved it. And I'm sure it will. And actually, so speaking of the book, I know in the book, one of the early chapters, it talks about what it means to think like a product manager. And you talk about different mindsets that a product manager, could have. I'm just wondering if you could kind of shed a little bit of light on this. And obviously, like, we're going to recommend folks dig into the book too, but maybe you could help a little bit on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about like think like a product manager, and it's an interesting topic because we talk about all the skills and different things that we do as a product manager day to day, but then I have found through my research that how we inherently approach our work, our mindsets and the way that we think about our job, as well as being very aware of what our kind of go-to strengths will be and maybe our weaknesses will be, is very important to be aware of and to be developing as much as the skills that we apply. So, you know, some of us are natural big thinkers, visionary. We work with many. We can be that, and sometimes we're very scant on details. Others like to go deep into the data and really understand sort of what the world looks like, what our customer looks like. Others, still with a heartfelt desire to be constructive, tend to push on assumptions, poke holes, challenge things, and really try to make ideas much more robust by really pushing hard. And others still are just great at exciting teams, motivating others around them, getting everybody kind of aligned around a vision. So while a successful product manager does not need to master all of these sorts of things, we need to be able to push outside of our comfort zones, balance our thinking, balance the thinking and the approaches of others in the organization around us to ensure we're making the right decisions. So to dig into that framework a little bit, if you just think of a simple 2x2 matrix, on one scale is imagine, which is very divergent thinking, very much about thinking about the possibilities, very broad. It's sort of suspending the reality that you have today. And that continuum comes all the way back to inspect. And inspect is much more about thinking about the details, looking at the reality that you have today, trying to gather data. Now, if you think that crossing another matrix, you have on one end sort of this very expansive thinking, thinking about like the world that could be. But then we know that in our role that focus is very important. And so on the other end of that scale is this convergent thinking, being very, very much like, this is what we've decided to do. How do we make that the best thing that we possibly can and keep everybody very, very focused? So and the framework is in the book, so you're welcome to have a look at that. But the 4 quadrants that result is this 4 mindsets of product managers. And one is explorer, the analyst, the challenger, and the evangelist. And these are 4 different mindsets that really great product managers tend to kind of flip between. It's actually quite interesting. They'll flip between them in even a day's work. So at one point you might be imagining the possibilities, seeking out and embracing new ideas. Even at first, if these ideas are very distracting, that you're embracing those, you're wanting to sort of ideas from anywhere. You're trying to set context for your team around the business and customer needs. You're understanding the problem space and basically potentially exploring multiple solutions around problems before focusing on one. And that's the explorer kind of mindset. In another moment, you might be hunting for new data and insights, kind of acting like a detective. You're knowing what you're looking to affect, so you're clear on your North Star for your product. You're understanding metrics are important. You cut and slice that data. You kind of always do your own or participate firsthand in customer and user interviews, so you can kind of understand trends and gather empathy. You don't just focus on the solutions, but get to know them as people and observe their problems to be solved. And you become very self-service in that. So you don't rely on other teams to do all of this analysis for you. So that's the analyst kind of mindset. The challenger is interesting because that's a subtle like psychology change. When rather than being very wedded to an idea or a particular direction, you kind of restate it in your head and to others as more of a hypothesis. And you kind of divorce your personal feelings from on like the solution to something that just can be tested. And it makes you err on the side of looking for smaller iterations and validating consistently. And when you deploy the challenger mindset, you start asking yourself and others the hard questions, and you start eliminating less promising paths, embracing dissenting voices. We've all had those people in our teams that seem to point out things that are wrong, or unhappy customers, which they're hard conversations to have, but you embrace that. And learn to understand the uncomfortable, challenge the assumptions, and prioritize hard. That's the challenger mindset. And then there's the evangelist, which is about really focusing and motivating and building that broad-based support for a particular path. This can be a hard one for product managers because it requires constant over-communication, education on the desired outcomes, the role that the product is playing in the business. It means bringing an infectious optimism and enthusiasm to work while still being realistic, obviously. Losing ownership, celebrating with the team, and just taking opportunities to really like talk about the great work that's going on. Now, these are quite interesting mindsets, can often be in contention at the same time. So you might literally be out there really getting excitement about a particular path you're taking while you're maybe meeting with executives talking about those not so rosy metrics that you're seeing and what you might need to do with them, and then flipping to a brainstorming meeting with some customers that you need to explore possible next generation like ideas. And that is a really great product managers think about being able to deploy those mindsets and work within them. And importantly, they understand the strengths of others like stakeholders and compensate for them. And I particularly have worked for some very visionary stakeholders that are all out on the evangelism and the exploration and the imagining dimension. And that's meant that I've had to balance them more by being a little bit more like grounding them in data, gently and diplomatically challenging, trying to do prioritization, trying to break down their ideas. So it's just a nice framework for people to think about, how do I think and approach my work?
I appreciate that. And I know some folks in the chat were asking about, hey, is there a visual for this? So when I follow up later, maybe there'll be a visual I can share, because I'm sure that'll be helpful too.
You're welcome to grab the framework I just talked about out of the book and attach it to the email.
Perfect. No problem. Oh, thank you. So I will do that with your permission. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And, the one thing I did want to ask you, and by the way, there's again, questions, feed them in the Q&A, everybody, because I'm going to get to as many as I can. The title of the book itself, The Influential Product Manager, influence, like that stands out to me. It seems like that might play a very big role. I mean, I know it plays a very big role in our life as a product manager and product leader. Can you talk about like, why is that influence so important, so much that you included it in the title of the book?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Look, let me start by defining two terms and then we'll go from there. So influence for me is all about aligning beliefs, behaviors, actions, and outcomes behind a common shared purpose. So if you think about that's what influence is, you'll notice that it's not just about aligning goals and outcomes, but it's also actually winning hearts and minds. So it's actually really ensuring that the stakeholders and the team around you not only align around the direction you're trying to set, but they truly believe that they're making a difference and they truly believe that it's the right thing to do. And that's a hard thing. That's a whole other bar for influence. Authority is directly controlling actions through organizational seniority, power of relationships, apparent or real expertise, or threat of consequences. And that's not a very healthy, frankly, way for a product manager to behave. I've actually heard some very unhelpful declarations of what a product manager is. My least favorite is, and sorry if I'm going to upset a couple of people here, but the product manager is the CEO of the product. I've heard that. I get that, but we're not CEOs. Yes, many of us are growing to become amazing CEOs, and the product managers a rich environment to build those skills. But CEOs have ultimate authority and they work largely through authority. And there are a few PMs who can make unilateral decisions on resourcing, product pricing, business strategy. They own a P&L maybe. They might be able to negotiate these, but they don't directly control them. And in fact, if a product manager attempts to manage by authority, more often than not, they fail. Now, counterintuitively, I believe great product managers are successful because they can only achieve their goals by being objective and influential. They're not acting through authority by their very position. So others, PMs must rely on the success of others, and to get others to align behind their goals and believe in the product that they're building or the solutions that they're building. They must use data, facts, have a sense of conviction, of vision. They must have a deep understanding of the business to have that respect, and just the fact that they've got that depth of knowledge of the business, the technology, and the user's needs. They must optimize for the needs of the customer and the business over their own goals. They must build trusted relationships to be effective. They must collaborate and compromise along the way to deliver the outcomes, and that to bring their team and stakeholders with them on pretty much every step of the journey. So not only does influence play a big role, in my opinion, and it's the only way a PM is effective in the long run.
I think it resonates with me for sure. And I know, as I was sort of thinking about it, I know with, to have influence, to gain influence, whether it's with stakeholders, customers, whatever it might be, there has to be some level of trust. So I was curious, your take on how can we as product people, particularly with our internal stakeholders, so maybe it's the engineering team, maybe it's the design UX team that we're working with, how can we work to gain better trust from the teams that we're working with?
Yeah, so without oversimplifying it, it might help to think about just a very simple trust equation, and reflect on how what you're doing to kind of build trust over time. So let me know if this answers your question. But if you think about trust as being a combination of the frequency of quality interaction with a stakeholder or team member, plus your follow through. Do you do what you say you're going to do, minus your perceived self-interest? So there's sort of three parameters there: quality interaction, frequency of quality interaction, your follow through and reliability of doing what you're saying you will do, and whether or not you're acting out of perceived self-interest or not. So if you think about those three things and are very deliberate, I believe you will build trust. So just to make it simple, it's not like every interaction has to be very lengthy or related to a business outcome or have to be super well planned. The key is actually frequency and high quality, and sort of being able to get beyond sort of pleasantries maybe with somebody, and getting to know them, but also talk about the business, and getting into a little bit of a trusted constructive conflict zone. Those sorts of interactions, and those happening frequently, is a key to building trust. It can't just happen once and expect that when you need that trust because you need to rely on that relationship, that it'll be there. I will also caveat, you have to build these before you need them. So you invest now in those relationships, so when you turn around and need help and support from a stakeholder, then they're there for you. Follow through should be obvious. You make commitments, you see them through. If something isn't going to happen, however, you make sure you give them an update and tell them what you're doing to take care of it. Even a simple commitment as I'll send an email or I'll track down an issue. If you don't follow through with that, that loses trust very quickly if you miss getting it done. So I, for example, take a very, very careful notes of commitments I've made, even small ones, and make sure that I follow through on them, because it will build trust and it will rapidly lose trust if something doesn't kind of get done. There's nothing worse for a stakeholder than wondering if something's wrong because they haven't heard about it. And then self-interest, it's how you talk. Are you speaking objectively? Are you asking open-ended questions? Are you clearly holding the best interest of, in this order, the customer first, the business second, the team third, and yourself last? And if you can honestly say that, you're off to building great trusted relationships. Tactically, there's a couple of other things I might quickly throw in. For stakeholders, senior stakeholders, nothing is worse than being surprised by hearing information from someone else first and not you. And certainly being surprised by uncomfortable information in a group setting where they haven't heard it. So practicing buy-in and no surprises policy is important. For engineering, it's important to orient yourself around the why and the outcomes that you're trying to drive, and empower that team to own the what and the how to get there, and being very much collaborative on the solution. So prescribing solutions or dictating kind of what needs to be built are the things that will rapidly lose trust with engineering, but being on top of the problem to solve and why it's important and providing that context will build a lot of trust. And then designers should, again, go without saying, but if you're using them to kind of turn around assets for you, you're going to lose trust. But if you open up enough space for creative problem solving, sharing what you know about the user, allowing opportunities to design experiences that are not just utilitarian, but also elegant, intuitive, and very satisfying for the customer, and space to explore and validate, you'll earn trust. So there's some specific tactics for a couple of different stakeholders there, but they'll all back to those quality interactions, follow through, and kind of that lack of self-interest.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. I want to take a couple audience questions. We have a couple here. Actually, one of them, it was about the 4 mindsets, specifically the mindset number 4, the evangelist. The person asking the question said that they struggle the most with this one because they have a hard time believing in the work that they're doing because it's prescribed to them. So maybe it's not, they're not setting the roadmap. But they're having to execute on it. So they're curious, how do they improve themselves in this situation?
Right. Common, unfortunate, but common. Look, you can't fake it. So you're going to have to figure out how to contextualize the work that you and your team are doing. And importantly, I would ask myself the questions about why are we doing this work and why is it important to the business? Even something that's prescribed is coming from some underlying rationale and motivation for why that's important for the business, why that's important for the customer, and trying to understand that and being able to communicate that, try to be excited about it is a great step forward. It may not feel like it's something you should evangelize, oh, we're going to reduce the cost for the business. But if you can put it in terms of, we're going to make someone's life better, or we're going to have this fundamentally better cost structure that's going to allow the business to serve more customers. Like, there are ways to look at even things that you're prescribed and maybe not that excited about personally in that light. Now, I'm not suggesting fake it, but try to get to the root underlying rationale, the why. If you don't know, go and talk that through with the stakeholders. And then don't forget that just explaining what the stakeholder wants is not evangelism, but actually trying to anchor it in how the emotion, the benefits that you're going to drive for your customers or the business, and telling a narrative, a story around that. Those are the sorts of things that will, I think, will help break through it. But even prescribed things do have a reason. So get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, that sounds like a good advice for sure. And then, I know we're kind of getting close to the end of our time. There is one last audience question I wanted to ask. This person, they're wanting to improve their capabilities, their confidence, their credentials. So they're asking, do you recommend getting a degree or taking a formal certification course? Or how else would you recommend that they are able to improve in those areas?
Great. So a degree or a class, there's a lot of really great classes out there. And, I've actually taught at some, uh, not just UC Berkeley, but some of the others as well. And I do think that they're good to teach you some skills. And definitely, if you're looking to transfer into product management, you don't really have very much in the way. Like, they're great for grounding. They're great for sort of putting there. I do recommend looking for a class or a program that anchors around practical application of the skills. So something that's more project based, something that's actually going to let you practice what you're learning, because that's how product managers get really good, is to apply themselves. So look for that. I do think that's a pretty good thing. But absent like being able to either have the time or the money for that, build a project, go and do a side project, build a web page, build a small mobile application. You'll go through that process, and you'll build empathy for developers and designers. You will understand the process to get things done, and you'll have that experience under your belt to talk to it. If you're not a PM today, try to moonlight as one. Seek out a product manager in your organization and ask to shadow or ask to take a small project on. I love my deputy product managers, just like getting and empowering them to help do something for the customer, or find some research. Any of those sorts of things are great. I would recommend going through kind of a job description and look at those different skills and try to identify what are the things that I kind of want to develop, and try to get to a point where you've driven some kind of outcome or delivery. So then you've got a nice bullet point for your resume as well. So I would try to do things. And remember, you don't have to be a product manager to do the skills of a product manager. You can pick a few things sort of on the side and demonstrate that. Even leadership skills, you don't even have to do them in business in an organization. You can do that in a group or a volunteer basis. Building those skills, being able to talk to what you've actually achieved from them, you'll build the skills up.
I love that. And I love the question too, because that's how we started Product Collective. We were trying to improve our capabilities, improve our confidence, and just talking to other product people really, really helped. So yeah, there are the classes and courses, and that's awesome. But I love the advice of just do something and talk to other people too. So I think that's really good advice. I would love to keep asking you questions. I know we're at the end of our time though, Ken. So thank you for being here. I would say, if we were to sort of end things, is there one sort of just big takeaway that you wanted to leave with people? Or maybe you could also just let people know how they could keep up with your work too.
Oh, absolutely. So, well, I'll do the takeaway. So, I mean, definitely you'll find lots more in there. I've tried to make that very, very practical and a great reference of like, what can I go do to actually apply myself here? I have a website, influentialpm.com. So you'll be able to see regular speaking and various other things there. I post the blog posts that I often do on guest blogs as well. Please connect to me on LinkedIn. I'm really actually quite happy to connect to anyone who's interested. That's linkedin.com/in/Ken Sandy, KenSandy. And I'd be more than happy to field some questions there. And so that'd be great. I'd be happy to connect, and I know we'll send that out to everybody. The takeaway. So I mean, I like just a little thing to think about in terms of maybe remembering what influence is in a nutshell. And there are 3 C words to think about. If you see your job as creating context to generate a shared understanding of the data and the problem space. Secondly, you're about clarity to drive alignment and focus on the right things to be pursuing. And then collaboration. If you collaborate well with a broad set of talented, multi-skilled, collaborative people of peers and stakeholders, if you do those 3 things well, that is influence. And so reflect on those 3 C's and figure out how to apply them in your workspace, and you'll do pretty well.
That's great. Well, it's a great way to end. Again, Ken, I appreciate the time, and thank you everybody for attending. There's plenty more of these. We actually have a few more planned. If you go to industryconference.com, just right at the bottom of the page. So join us for future industry interview sessions, and I'll follow up a bit later today with all the resources we talked about. And thanks for joining us. So have a great afternoon, everybody, and have a good night, Ken.
Oh, thank you, Mike.
Bye now.
Bye.